Hey folks, it's Echo here. Let's talk about the end of 7 Days to Die. Not the final curtain call, but the end, where we actually get our hands on a finished product. For 10 years, the Fun Pimps have stumbled along a path littered with reworked mechanics, but incremental progress towards a vision, their vision of 7 Days to Die. But today we're not going to talk about that vision. If you want to check out that, you can go look at my Alpha 21 video that covers that. Today, we're going to talk about what I would do if I had control of 7 Days to Die. Let's start off with what's broken. Performance needs a massive overhaul, and this would be one of the first things that I tackle before we ever even get into features. If you can look and see here, I'm getting around 20 frames per second, and I'll flash my system settings up. And I would expect a lot more than that. I'm running at stock medium settings just as a reference. And I know some people will say, well, there's all this crazy stuff that you can do, but I honestly don't think I should have to look to the arcane arts to hit 60 frames per second. If I were in charge, I'd put the minimum and recommended settings that are on Steam and establish associated frames per second at medium at least, so that you have a benchmark to start from. The second item on my broken list would be game progression. This has transitioned over time from learn by doing over to the learn by spending points, and then in Alpha 21 we're going to see a new system called learn by looting. Now bear with me for a second because I want to get a little bit philosophical on the reason behind why we play games. Typically in life, whether it be at school or at work, we don't have full control of everything in our environment. And when we sit down to play a game, we want to know that our actions and decisions have impact, and that's agency. For me personally, the alpha with the most agency was Alpha 16, where we had the learn by doing system. This meant that if you were out and beating a zombie in the face with a club, you got better with clubs. It just made sense. Now, there were some super cheesy exploits like sitting and beating on a rock with a club, but I think that there's ways that we could patch those and create thresholds to still make the learn by doing viable. In the world of modded 7 Days to Die, they've done exactly that. Ravenhurst, Undead Legacy, and Darkness Falls have all come up with creative approaches to the learn by doing system, and I think that some blend of those would be perfect to add into vanilla moving forward. Next on my broken list is how we acquire loot. Ideally, you want the trader, looting, and crafting to all be viable pathways to get good loot in the game. As of Alpha 20, if we had to rank these, it would probably look something like this. Typically, by the time you've put points into crafting, it's almost completely obsolete because you've already found tier 5 and tier 6 items from either the other two sources. So to fix this, I would take away quality 6 items from both the trader and the loot pool, and I would make those items only available through crafting. Next, I would remove or significantly increase the price of any item that creates a massive jump in progression. Think of things like the nail gun, the crucible, any of the vehicles, the 4x4 gyro, mini bike, motorcycle, etc. Finally, I would give crafting the ability to upgrade items, weapons, and armor. The combination of all of this would result in less RNG and more overall agency for the player. For the last broken item, let's talk about the skill trees. For all too long, the strength int combo has reigned on high. In the strength tree, you've got Sexual Tyrannosaurus and Minor 69er, which are borderline table stakes just for playing the game. Honestly, the only weak perk here is Pack Mule, as it can be made completely irrelevant through items. In the intellect tree, you have Better Barter and the Daring Adventurer, which together can allow you to completely dominate in terms of items and coin. These two together are a min-maxer's wet dream. There's a number of ways to fix this, but Alpha 21 is going to throw a wrench magazine at this, so I'm just going to leave it at this. Strength and int need to be taken down a peg, and any skill like Sexy Rex, which is borderline required, should be rebalanced so that it's not a must-have for every playthrough. So those are the broken bits. Now let's talk about what's missing from 7 Days to Die to get to gold. I'm going to cover facets of quality of life, multiplayer support, quests, electrical, and world immersion. So if you've played 7 Days to Die for any amount of time, you know how cumbersome inventory management can be. This is one of the trickier parts of the game and takes up a lot of time. You come back from your quests, you get back to your base, you got all these boxes set up, and you go to dump your stuff off, and inevitably you will end up dropping off things that you need, like meds and food and all that good stuff. So the first thing that I would recommend to be part of gold would be lock slots. Kane developed this and it has become a standard part of all my servers. I don't know how I lived without it. You've got slots here. You can determine how many you want. In this case, I've got 9, which is the first row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And what this does is locks these in place. So if I hit sort, it will sort everything below that, but nothing prior to that. So this allows you to come into boxes like your med box, double click here, and it's going to keep your first aid bandages and your first aid kit that are also up here rather than matching it with those associated stacks up there. One other nice addition would be to have this for both vehicles and your storage slots. The next thing that I will call out You'll notice that these stack sizes that I have here are extremely large. So we use a mod that increases the stack sizes. I believe it's called Reasonable Stack Size, and you can check that out on the YouTube description below. But this should be a configurable option so that depending upon how you want to play the game, you can adjust these. Also linked to inventory, we spend a huge amount of our time crafting in 7 Days to Die. In an Undead Legacy, you have this wonderful function called broadcast storage for crafting, where when this is clicked, it allows the contents of all these boxes, as long as you've clicked that button, to be accessible as long as you're within 10 blocks at any crafting station or just in your backpack. So you can come into here and you notice my inventory is empty over here, but I have access to craft all this stuff here. So this is one of those huge quality of life time savers that I think would be great for gold. And while we're here in Undead Legacy, I'm just going to take this opportunity to talk about another area of improvement that I think would be required for gold, and that's a more modern looking HUD, your heads up display. So they did a great job here of just giving something that's a bit sharper. They've got more details that should be standard, and I would actually love to see all of this be configurable, where you can see your health, your stamina, your food, your water. Ideally, I'd like to see elevation, and ideally, I'd like to see all of those be configurable items on how you view the screen so you can shift it. The last thing missing on quality of life while we're still here in Undead Legacy is changes to the map. Undead Legacy is still constrained by the same map function that's in standard vanilla 7 Days to Die, but this always has driven me crazy. I would love to be able to zoom all the way out to the map so that you don't have to drag this and scroll ad nauseum until you're ready to pull your hair out. So that's one big change that I put in here. I'd also want it to just have a little bit more of a modern look, a little bit higher resolution once you're zooming in here. And then finally, one of the things that I do like on Undead Legacy that they added is that you have a much wider range of icons to use when you're actually placing a waypoint. Next up, let's talk about quest management. Over the period of time that 7 Days to Die has been developed, multiplayer games have become really savvy in terms of how you share and accept quests from teammates. There's several elements of this that just take away from the immersion of the game. The first is that it's very difficult to understand how you actually share and then accept the quest here. And then secondarily, when you're going to pick up your quest from the trader, it's difficult to understand whether someone already has that quest or not. For the first issue, I'd like a screen element that we can toggle on and off that just has your quests listed out that you can sort by tier and distance, and then highlights which one the team is currently active or going after. For the second issue, I believe this is as simple as adding an indicator in the trader that shows if someone else in your group already has a quest. Next thing I'd like to see is some way to have persistent groups. And by persistent, I mean if you log out or get kicked out of the server and come back in, the whole group doesn't have to reshare all their quests, and you don't have to reshare your quest back with them. One of the areas that we get variation in gameplay is through quests. Currently, the game has essentially 5 different quests. You got Fetch, Clear, Buried Supplies, Restore Power, and then Fetch, Clear combo. And then additionally, you have Open Trade Routes, which is not very common. The Fun Pimps have alluded to 2 new quests coming to Alpha 21, but I'm just going to rattle through 8 that came off the top of my head. Number 1, the Simple Kill quest. We used to have challenges that you'd find in the game that would say go out and kill 5 bears. We could bring that back as a trader quest. Number 2, the Basic Gather quest. Go grab X of a certain type of material and bring it back to the trader. Number 3, a variation on that theme. Retrieve or craft a specific item and bring it back to the trader. Number 4, Escort quest. Now this would require some additional coding, obviously, because we need survivors of some type in the world. Number 5, Delivery between traders. This would allow you to leverage the new bandits in order to have a quest where you move from one trader to another and potentially get attacked by bandits in the process. Number 6, speaking of bandits, raiding a bandit base. Number 7, defend the node, but add something interesting into it. Make a POI where you have to get to a certain location within a certain time of starting the quest, and then maybe defend for a certain period of time. Number 8, establish communications outpost. So this one is similar to the Restore Power, except for after seeing the Decagon artwork with the new radios, I thought it'd be cool to leverage those in conjunction with the generators and give you a holistic, put the power grid back together and get comms up and running. So those are just some of the concepts that I have on questing. If you've got some ideas, drop them down in the comments below. Let's hop on into electricity. This is one of my favorite features in 7 Days to Die, but unfortunately it hasn't changed much since it was introduced back in Alpha 16. So here's a few of my ideas just to mix things up. So the first thing I want to talk about is signal inversion. In 7 Days to Die, you've got a handful of different control agents, and the assumption is that you have power going to a control agent and then going to a device, and that whenever that is on the control agent, then it will be on the device. So in this case, I flip the switch on, the light turns on. But what if we wanted to reverse that? There's a number of scenarios in a Horde base that it would be really handy to have that flip. So my suggestion is that When you look at the switch here, you hold down E, it brings up a quick menu that says, do you want to invert the signal on this control agent? And then it would simply invert that. And then instead of turning the power on, it would turn it off, and vice versa. Is wireless relays. Now these are really nice for cleaning up your base a little bit. The way they work is if I come from my power source, I go into this wire relay and you see it turns on, and then I go from here to here. You see it makes no wires whatsoever, and then I can come from here over to this light source, and again you don't see anything. Now the one adjustment that I would make, these only cost 2 watts each. I would make these cost a lot more. I'm thinking like 10 or 20 just to make the game more balanced so that you're using these sparingly and not at your whimsy. In terms of electrical devices in the game, I'd love to see some more traps. Here's some spikes that Subquake had implemented in Undead Legacy, but I'd love to see a slew more just to re-envision and make us imagine how to create a Horde base again. The other type of trap I'd love to see is some type of flame turret along the lines of this. This is pulled from Night of the Dead. Now, I know Joel had done a drawing of this a number of years back, but we'd love to see that. You know, we've seen the new environmental hazards in the game, so maybe this will be a possibility. So I saved one of the best missing areas for last, and that is world immersion. I'm going to run you through some features and concepts that will make the characters and the world just seem more cohesive and connected. While the zombies in the world around us have gotten a significant HD update, the character profile is still just lagging behind. And this is one that really kills immersion for me personally, because I enjoy, you know, customizing your character, getting all the facets, and then getting the outfit that makes it all come together. Luckily, the Fun Pimps seem to have recognized this and have gone ahead and updated the new character model. Here's what they posted out on Twitter. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the profiles. So next I want to take a minute and talk about bandits. I know that they're currently slated for Alpha 21, but they are not on the confirmed list. And in addition, from an AI perspective, they've been described more as zombies with occasional ranged weapons. Before we hit gold, I'd like to see them have a little bit more complicated behavior patterns, as well as have factions that perhaps link to the traders to give the world a more immersive and connected feel. Let's talk about zombie fashion. It was a year ago during the dev streams that the Fun Pimps talked about the new tent system, which would be able to apply to not just items in the game, but also to zombies. As an example, here's what Bo could potentially look like in some sexy new duds, and I can only imagine what Horde Night would look like with that much variety amongst all the different zombies. In order to bring some life to this dead world, in addition to bandits, I'd also like to run into other survivors out there. For me, one of the best improvements that came with Alpha 20 was the addition of all these new shapes into the game. There's now a total of 1,365 shapes available, but unfortunately we only have 175 textures to work with. And quite honestly, a lot of these are just not really viable or usable, and they don't match up when we're talking about the HD updates they made in other areas. So I'd like to see a complete revamp of the textures, get some new ones in here, and give us some additional options for building. For the builder types in 7 Days to Die, having access to all the decorative pieces is really critical, and for some reason you can't make most of them in-game. My community is leveraging a modlet by Vedu42, but I think for gold, everything here needs to be craftable in-game. Speaking of existing unleveraged assets, colored lighting has long been an aspect of the prefab editor. We just don't have access to this when we're actually playing the game, and I think this would be a massive improvement because we could add some real character to our bases. All you do is come up to the light, hold down E and hit edit, and then from here you can either put in RGB values or you can just go through the color spectrum and put whatever you want. Additionally, you can change some other characteristics in regards to the intensity of the light, the range, how far it goes, and things like that. Then you hit OK and it clicks on in, and there you go. You've got a totally different feel for the room. Vehicles in 7 Days to Die are fairly limited, and I don't think this is a novelty item. I actually think this is a critical part of the world development. When I think of the post-apocalyptic world that is 7 Days to Die, I honestly don't think you should be able to build a car, period. I actually really appreciate the approach that Undead Legacy does, where you can find a vehicle, create a repair kit, and then basically salvage a car that's out there. I think that makes a lot more sense and would be better in terms of kind of the world feel. It also has a secondary effect of trying to push you around the map to find the specific vehicles that you're looking for, especially since different vehicle types have different characteristics that make them more advantageous for either carrying things or getting places faster. But overall, more vehicles in 7 Days to Die would be a welcome addition. So this one should be pretty straightforward, folks. What we're talking about is adding some boss zombies towards end game. And this is because you hit a certain point and cranking up the difficulty settings just doesn't really cut it. So you can see some examples here that Kane put together in Darkness Falls of some just monstrous beasts to fight against. But I think 7 Days to Die really needs this. The last missing item I want to talk about is story. We all remember that first time that you woke up in Navezgane, you got this cryptic message from your buddy Noah here, and you're like, sweet, I'm naked, I gotta find my way in this world, but there's this scary dude named the Duke who's gonna come looking for me. And then you check and you get this note, and you apparently owe him something, and then you never hear from the Duke, or Noah, or anything else related to a story, which I'm partially okay with, quite honestly. I'm not looking for a full-blown RPG here, but what I would like to see in 7 Days to Die before we get to gold is something that connects the world together. I want to learn more about this eclectic group of traders and what their relationship is to the Duke. I also want to know more about this debt that I owe the Duke and how do I pay it off. And then there's these bandits. Are they working for the Duke? Are they working for the traders? I'm not sure. And also, are there other survivors out there just like me? Ultimately, I just want to have more of an understanding of how my character fits into this world. How is he or she connected to all these elements? So we've covered broken and missing items, and now I just want to take a few minutes and talk about new concepts for the game to give us some different ways of playing and to enhance the end game. So currently we have 5 traders in the game with unique specializations in regards to what they sell. But what if those specializations extended beyond that? In most of my playthroughs, I get to the tier 5 quest unlock, and then I realize they're not really worth the time because you can do 3 tier 4s in the time of a tier 5 and end up with way more loot. So the question I had is, how do we make the tier 5s more valuable? What if at the end of a tier 5, instead of just getting your quest rewards, you would actually have the opportunity to upgrade an item beyond quality 6 based off the specialization of the trader. And beyond that, I'd want this to be a repeatable process, so you could pick an item and just go to town on it and just grind tier 5s to your heart's content. So you'd actually have to have the stat increase or whatever the bonus would be to be pretty minimal. So staying on the topic of traders and specifically endgame, I want to talk about this idea of a dynamic trader compound. Let's imagine that you have different areas in the compound that at the start of the game just aren't there for that trader, but you can unlock them through completing a certain number of quests of a particular type. Now, what do these unlocks do? It could be all kinds of a range of different bonuses or boons, or it could be nothing. It could be just merely cosmetic. But either way, it would give us a different reason to try the different quest types out, as well as give us something to grind for in the end game. This one is very straightforward. What I would love to see is some traveling vendors or even some secret ones hidden across the map. I want to take us back to the various groups that exist in the 7 Days to Die world. As we roll in bandits, I think there's a huge opportunity here to put in some concept of factions or reputation. This could have either an impact on the dynamics of how you deal with certain traders or the bandits, or maybe it loops into the overall story of how the Duke interacts with all these groups. One of the great things about 7 Days to Die is that you can approach the game in a number of different ways. You could play a challenge mode where you have no traders. You could play a single biome. You could play where you only can use spears, whatever you want. But I do wish there was a bit of an easy button to have a few baked-in game modes. What if you started a new run and every day the difficulty just continued to scale and get harder and harder and goes even beyond insane? Or maybe a mode that forces you to move across the map with a lot of constraints, including horde nights and landscape that prevents you from getting there. And lastly, imagine a world where the biomes had a massive effect in terms of what resources were available, radiation, and where you could grow plants. So these are just a few game modes off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a million ideas out there. If you've got some, throw them down in the comments. I'm curious to see what you come up with. For the final part of this video, I want to cover community engagement and product vision. I'd like to apologize, console players, for that last jab, but I did it to illustrate a point. You see, the thing is, the Fun Pimps have created this incredible game that we all love and we're very passionate about. So I want to pause for a quick second and say thank you, Fun Pimps, sincerely. I know a lot of us content creators come across as harsh and judgmental and think we know it all. We don't. We don't have a clue what we're doing here. We just find a game that we love and we want to talk about it and we want to engage with you on it. So as a player with 3,000 hours spent in 7 Days to Die and equal if not more amount spent creating content for the community, I'd like to hit on 2 frustration points that I think would make a huge difference if they were addressed. The first item is lack of clear product vision. We don't really know what the goal of each alpha is, or how many alphas it's going to take to get to gold, or what gold looks like when it's actually completed. And that leaves the console players also completely out in the dark, because all they've heard thus far is once we get to gold, then we'll develop console. And item number 2 relates back to item number 1 in that you've got a lot of community frustration because they don't know where the game's going. Then there's just not quite a cohesive communication structure with the modder community and in the content creator community and directly to the players. The second point is around the community engagement model. So this one ties back to the first one in regards to the lack of vision, and that causes a lot of frustration amongst the community, not knowing where we're heading in terms of the game. And then they hear statements like it'll be done when it's done, and then we don't have a lot of good ways for modders and content creators to have a ongoing dialogue, conversation back and forth with the Fun Pimps. So to address these, I actually think it's very simple, and I hope we see this during the dev streams this next go around. For gold, what are the table stakes? What are the key features that have to be in there for gold to be a reality? Number 2, what are the stretch goals? What is the ideal? Like if we could just take it to the limit, we add all the cash in the world, what are the stretch goals that we do? Number 3, what is the plan for console? Just give these poor folks something. They're dying, they're hungry, they want to play this game so bad. And generally, any info is better than no info. For the second point out there, I think you need to figure out a way to make the community more heard. I'd like to see more interaction directly with the modders, so that when a new version comes out, they're ready to go. They're working lockstep with you. There's some big folks out there, Kane and Subquake and a few others there that are making some incredible stuff, and I'd love to see more interaction there. And speaking of engagement model, I'd love to see the Fun Pimps shift to a more agile approach. Right now, we've got these massive waterfall cycles where we're doing a full year of development, and then we drop this gigantic bomb down on the community. And you see the cycles go up and down over the years. But what I'd love to see are these smaller release cycles, at least where they can do smaller feature sets and get those out to the community, get them tested, get the feedback, make adjustments on just those smallers, which would keep a more engaged community throughout the year, which I think would be overall much, much better to the game and hopefully would get us to the end state faster. So thanks for joining me for my vision of 7 Days to Die, and I hope you'll all join me down in the comments section below. And I'd like to actually keep it positive rather than going to town on bashing the game or anything like that. I want to hear what your ideas of what you think is missing that would just take the game over the top, or what you think is brand new that could be added into the game. So tell me those items, and otherwise, folks, I can't wait to cover Alpha 21 when the dev streams start up. And if you're out at TwitchCon, I'll see you there. I'm excited to meet up with some of the Fun Pimps there. But otherwise, take care, folks. That goes out. Hey folks, I just want to give a huge shout out to my patrons up here. If you've enjoyed this, consider dropping a like and a subscribe. Otherwise, go check out those videos. Come on, go do it.